Hello chess friends and welcome to Zadov's chess channel and welcome to the Tata Steel Masters tournament in 2020 in Wijk. So we have the clash in round 7, Vishy Anand versus Magnus Carlsen, the former world champion against the current world champion Magnus, and this was, I think, the most interesting game from this round. Vishy Anand is back in the tournament. He has won a game in the last round, a great game I think, and Magnus Carlsen on the other hand has only played draw so far. I don't think that he's satisfied with the performance in this tournament, but on the other hand he has broken some world records now in this tournament, so still I think he can be satisfied with that fact. Let's see the game. What happened with the white pieces? We have the legendary Vishy against Magnus. We have e4 played by Anand. We have c5 played by Carlsen, the Sicilian so far, knight to f3, and here knight to c6. And when I saw that Magnus played this move knight to c6, I expected really Magnus to go into the Sveshnikov like he always liked to play against Fabiano Caruana in the World Championship match. Here bishop to b5, we have the Nezhmedinov attack, and now Magnus played the move g6. He played that move very often also against Caruana, but now I think Vishy Anand plays a great opening preparation. Most of the times Fabiano Caruana simply took out the knight on c6 without even being challenged with the move a6. So I would take, of course, the bishop to c6 on c6 after potential a6. But if your opponent doesn't challenge you, I don't think that you have to do something. Here you can simply castle like Vishy Anand played, and Magnus is also not reacting. He played a normal developing move, and now here we have c3 played by Vishy. Knight to f6, still common theory, and now rook to e1. This is a very important move because it prepares now the move d4, and with that move Vishy Anand is trying to build a pawn central control here with his two pawns in the center. And in the game castling played by Magnus, we have d4 by Vishy, and now we have a6. And okay, you don't have to give up your bishop here now in this particular stage of the game. You can play bishop to f1. It's also a good move, I think, simply retreating with the bishop but staying on a very active diagonal. In the game, bishop to d3 played by Vishy Anand, which is the preparation to finally push the pawn on e5, and if the position allows it, even d5. If we get these two pawns on the 5th rank connected, then it will be very dangerous for Magnus. So that's why Magnus played, I think, the accurate move. He played an aggressive move in the center with the move d5, counter-attacking in the center, and here e5 played by Vishy Anand. E takes d5, I don't think that it brings you so much, because here queen to d5 can be played, simply continuing to push against white central control. Here if you try c4, again not a problem. I think we can simply retreat to d6, and after something like d5 we can simply again try to challenge white center with the move knight to d4, because now creating an outpost like this one from black's perspective is very good. After potential knight takes d4, c takes d4 can be played, and now after bishop to f1, if you want to attack, for instance, this pawn, here I think e5 solves all of the positional problems for black. If you take en passant, again it's not a problem because we can simply capture the pawn, bishop to e6, and now we could attack this c4 pawn. The c4 pawn has to be, of course, protected even more by the b3 pawn, but the more important thing is that we have now a very annoying pawn. It is an isolated pawn, but it can always be supported with the move knight to d7, because this bishop is very dangerous, and then some discovered attack possibilities maybe with the move d3 are possible. So that's why Vishy Anand played a normal move. Here we have e5 challenging the knight in the center. Maybe immediately knight to e4 is good for Carlsen, because after bishop to e4 here in the center, I just wanted to show you some possible lines in the center. Here you have the, of course, d takes e4, rook takes e4, and now bishop to f5 I think is very good, attacking the rook. The rook has to retreat, and now after something like rook to e1, bishop to g4. This is a very important move because it attacks here the pawn on d4. If you try something like bishop to e3 to defend, I think we can simply take out the knight. Taking with the queen is not so good because then the d pawn is hanging. So here after g takes f3, at least we have some compensation for the pawn, so that's why here it isn't such a clear line, I think, for white and for black. Still, if you take, for instance, this pawn, d takes c5, then your e5 pawn is hanging, and then we have some weaknesses on f3. So in the game, Magnus, instead of this knight to e4, he played the move. So instead of knight to e4, he played knight to e8, trying to get this knight on this square, c7. This is a good defensive setup by Magnus, because after the move knight to c7, the knight can be a good protector here on e6. Never allow this pawn to create a pawn breakthrough, because in some occasions white can try here the move e6 and trying to weaken further black's pawn structure in front of the king. So in the game, d takes c5, played by Vishy Anand. He simply took out the pawn now. Although Magnus is now pawn down, but there are now two weaknesses in the position. It's the pawn on e5 and of course on c5, and now you want to play simply on that weaknesses. So bishop to g4, again the spinning idea, because the knight on f3 is the key defender of the pawn on e5. Here bishop to e2 was played by Vishy Anand, and the problem is you cannot take here the pawn. Then you get knight takes e5, of course, discoverably attacking the bishop. If you take, for instance, the bishop, then queen to e2 protects also this knight. So far it's not possible to recapture the pawn, so you have to play more patient. You have to create more pressure against these pawns. In the game, the Magnus played this defensive idea, knight to c7, with the preparation to play finally knight to e6 and also attacking the move c5. Here, knight from b to d2 was played by Vishy Anand, and now Vishy tries a very important move, knight to b3. If knight to b3 happens, then we can really support the c5 pawn, and maybe even try something like knight to d4, fixing the position really in the center, trying to get a compact position in the center. In the game, Magnus, that's why, played a very important move, a5. If knight to b3, then we have this a4 possibility to kick away the knight. So here h3, played by Vishy Anand. Vishy simply doesn't like this tense situation here on the king side. Bishop takes f3. I don't think it brings you so much, because here we can simply take with the knight, and if you, for instance, try knight to e5 to take out the knight, then we can simply take out the knight. Knight takes e5 can be played, and after bishop to e5, simply here we have bishop to f3. This bishop comes on a very active diagonal, and now we have also this discovered attack against black's bishop. So you have to, for instance, retreat here to g7, but now I think bishop to g5 is very, very dangerous. Now this e7 pawn is hanging. You have to play something like rook to e8, but I think it's a little bit too passive, because there is also the threat queen to b3 attacking here this weak b7 pawn, and also then after that maybe something like rook to d1, creating even further pressure on the square d5. So for instance, you could try something like f6 here, but bishop to h4 can be played, simply staying on this very important diagonal, because in this particular position black would love to advance the pawn, getting this pawn set in control here with this d5 pawn and e5 pawn. So far it's not possible. In the game, bishop to c8 was played by Magnus, simply retreating with the bishop, and here Vishy Anand played the move bishop to d3, finally protecting this pawn on e5. At least we can hang onto that pawn, on that pawn. But now again this c5 pawn is a weakness. That's why here Magnus simply played knight to e6, attacking the c5, and now knight to b3. But you see the importance of this move played by Magnus, this move a5, great calculation so far. So that's why here a4, kicking away the defender, and now of course Vishy played knight to d4, fixing the center, but again you lose the pawn. You have lost your extra pawn. Magnus calculated that very good, and now bishop to c2 played by Vishy Anand. Here queen to f5. You see now Magnus plays very actively with the pieces. The pieces are now good connected. They are also in attacking formations, because now there is one threat. Serious threat could be, for instance, a3. Of course you can play something like b4, but it weakens further the pawn structure. On the queen side there are maybe some holes then in the position, if for instance the c4 square could be a weakness in long term. So here Vishy Anand tried the move bishop to d2, and it was maybe a slightly inaccuracy. There are more active moves, I think, like bishop to g5, here attacking maybe the pawn. The serious threat here is to take out the knight to c6, and then to take out the pawn. So you would be forced maybe to play something like e6, but then maybe we can even try queen to d2, get rid of this dark square bishop, because now with the move e6 you have further weakened the dark squares around your king. So that's why maybe queen to d2 is a potential possibility with the preparation to play something like bishop to h6. This, I haven't calculated all of that, it's just one of my ideas. I would maybe continue like this here, or you can try here, instead of this e6 you can try rook to e8, but again you don't want to have these pieces simply stuck to the defensive pawns. Now again you can try this move a3, simply preventing this a3 by black. So okay, bishop to d2 was played, as said, maybe a little bit too passive, I'm not sure, but it of course creates some discovered attack possibilities, but they are not so dangerous. Here Magnus simply played rook to d8. Let's for instance see what happens if you play c4. It's not a problem, because we can simply retreat with the queen here on c7. If you try knight to b5, I think we can again hide on a very active square here, queen to b8. Another problem, the queen stays on a very active diagonal and attacks also this e5 pawn. So for instance, if you take here, c takes d5, then the rook comes very active into the game on the same file like the queen. So so far not it's nothing special here. After rook to d8, queen to c1, played by Vishy Anand, again maybe with the preparation to play this move bishop to h6, forcing the trades of dark square bishop, because then black is continuing the game without defenders around the king. In the game, knight to e6, played by Vishy Anand, challenging finally this knight, and now b4, played by Vishy. Here we have queen to c7. Maybe even you can try en passant a takes b3, and then maybe trade off even more pieces on the queen side, simplify the position. But here Magnus decided to go queen to c7, and now we have knight to c6 played by Anand. We have b takes c6, and now bishop to e3, trying to get sort of a central control again. Is Vishy Anand is trying to regroup a little bit to get these pawns glued together. Here in the game, c5 was played, a very aggressive move played by Magnus. So we have b takes c5, here knight to c5, queen to a3, played by Vishy Anand, simply attacking the knight, and now knight to e6. And now the game becomes really tactical, because here Vishy Anand played a really tricky move. He prepared the move rook from a to b1, and now Magnus pushed the pawn on d4, and there is now one problem. If you take here Vishy Anand took knight to d4, here we have bishop to e5 played by Magnus, but there is a tricky line. If you for instance take out the knight to d4, then we have here bishop to d4, and now rook to d4 doesn't bring you so much. It seems now that you lose two bishops for the rooks, which would be a good continuation for black. But after c takes d4 and queen to c2, there is one move I think you could have missed. For instance, if you're weaker player, of course, then Magnus Carlsen saw of course all of these tactics, but now queen to f3 is very dangerous. To see how important this rook to b1 was. So you cannot defend here the 8th rank anymore. You have to retreat, for instance, but now rook to c1, and it would be game over, because you lose the bishop simply in the next move. So yeah, tricky stuff that Vishy Anand has prepared. But queen to f5 doesn't bring you so much, because again we have rook to b8, and we can take out the bishop in the next couple of moves. So that's why here bishop to e5 played by Magnus Carlsen. We have knight to b5 attacking the queen, and now queen to c6, staying simply with the queen very actively. Now there is a threat maybe to get the queen somehow here, pardon me, the knight on f4, creating some checkmate threats here, even on g2. In the game, rook to b4 was played, and now Vishy makes maybe the main inaccuracy sort of in the game. I think there is a better move here, maybe bishop to h6 instead of this rook to b4. Now there is a discovered attack by the rook on the bishop. So what to do here? If you try bishop to f6, you see, then you get here bishop to e4, and your rook is hanging, so it's a lost position, I think, for black in that particular move order. But if you try, for instance, bishop to d6 to create a counter attack on the queen, I think we can simply take out here. Bishop to e4 doesn't work anymore because your attack queen is also attacked. But now knight to d6 solves, I think, white's all positional problems, because after something like queen to d6, okay, we have now a simplified position, but I still like this dark square bishop very much, because it attacks now the dark squares. You don't have anymore the dark square bishop. The key defender of dark squares is now the knight on e6. There are maybe some tactical possibilities. Maybe you could try somehow to sneak into dark squares with the queen if the position allows it. It has to be prepared. But from this middle game perspective, I simply like to play now with the bishop pair. With this open position, I think Vishy Anand could have a better position. In the game, as said, he played the move rook to b4, which allowed now Magnus Carlsen to regroup with the move bishop to b7. You see now this bishop to e5, e4 is not so powerful. Okay, here Vishy Anand played bishop to e4 anyway, but now after queen to d7, after trades of pieces, here queen to d7 was played, and now the position is even more simplified. And now, okay, we have the same material on the board. Still, Magnus has some troubles, because this a4 pawn is a weakness in long term, so it cannot be basically even protected. You have to lose the pawn, but okay, it's still playable for both sides. Here rook takes a4, played by Vishy Anand. We have bishop to f4, we have rook takes a8, rook takes a8, and now here queen to b3, regrouping a little bit with the queen, and also waiting Magnus to take here the bishop, and then recapture with the rook. Then this rook could be a good defender also here on the third rank. So in the game, as said, bishop to e3 played by Magnus Carlsen. We have rook takes e3, and now knight to f4, creating this checkmate threat on g2, but it's of course protectable with the rook to f3. Here Magnus tried queen to e4, and now king to h2. Here we have knight to d5 played by Magnus Carlsen, and now c4. Now we have an extra pass pawn. Still, if you play this endgame correctly, it's, I think, a theoretical draw, but there will be a problem now for Magnus, because now in the next couple of moves Vishy can play with this rook behind the pawn, creating the so-called Tarash rule. The Tarash rule says that you should bring your rooks always behind your pawns, but also behind your enemy's pawns. So sometimes when you're trying to attack your opponent's pawns, go behind these pawns and try to attack them. So here after c4 we have queen to e5, a check, not a problem, because here Vishy can cover with the move g3. We have knight to f6, and now we have finally the move a3. Knight to e4, we have queen to c2 attacking the knight. Now the threat is of course to play something like rook to e3. In the game, knight to g4, g5 was played by Magnus, rook to e3, counter-attacking, and now queen to c5, trying to create a blocking system against this advanced pawn on c4. In the game, of course, h4 kicking away the knight to e6, and now queen to e2. Now there are even some tactical threats if the position allows it. Of course, rook takes e6 could be also a very interesting idea. Rook to c8 played by Vishy, and now finally this move rook to c3. Now everything is protected. Now you see how Vishy Anand glued all of these pieces together. He played really on this compact position. Now it's still dangerous for Magnus here. Magnus has to be careful. Basically, black is only hoping for a draw here. Black, I think, cannot win this game. Only white can win this game, so that's why here I think Vishy Anand has a favorable endgame. In the game, h5 played by Magnus Carlsen, and now king to g2, improving the position of the king. Here king to f8 was played, and now queen to e4. We have king to g7. You see g8, Magnus is simply repeating moves, hoping here that maybe Anand will offer a draw. Queen to d5, offering to trades of queens, we have queen to b6 and now a4. Now this knight is protected, so now in couple of moves, if the position allows it, the serious threat is here, the move c5. Here Magnus played queen to a6 and now we have c5. You see the queen is not supporting anymore and Magnus simply took out the pawn. But there is now one problem. Here c6 played by Vishy Anand. This pawn is really dangerous. In the game, rook to d8 was played and now queen to c4, offering the trades of queens. Magnus accepted that, and here we have rook to c4, and now we come to the critical position of the game after rook to b8, and here Vishy Anand played the correct move, I think c7, and after rook to c8, here Vishy Anand, I think, missed the position. He played the move rook to c1, and in this position both players agreed to a draw, which is incredible, because there is, I think, a better move here that Vishy Anand could have played. He could have played here the move rook to b4. For instance, if you take, of course, knight to c7, that's the problem. Then you get rook to c4, and you lose the knight, or you lose the exchange in the continuation, because after knight takes b5, here rook takes c8, and I think maybe Wijk can still go for a win here. But if you try, for instance, there is one tricky line. If you this after rook to b4, here if you try king to pardon me, let's go back one move. Here if you try king to f8, then knight to d6 is very dangerous. If you take, you see the rook is attacked, and if you take here the pawn, the knight, then you get rook to b8, and you cannot protect anymore the rook. You have to give up again the exchange. Knight takes c7 has to be played, but now we can simply take out here also the rook, and now this is a weak pawn. I think we can attack it. So basically in this position, after rook to b4, black would be forced to bring the king here always on the 7th rank, not to stay here on the 8th rank. But now I think here in this particular position you cannot play rook to king to f8. You have to play something like king to g7, but it leaves now, I think, White the opportunity to play more actively with our king. Maybe something like king to f3, maybe king to e4 if the position allows it. So I think this is still playable for White. I'm not sure, you can also comment on that. I think this could be even a winning endgame here for Vishy Anand, but as said, here in the game, Vishy Anand played, instead of this move rook to b4, he played the move rook to c1, and allowed now basically Magnus Carlsen to go here more actively with the king, and after a couple of moves the pawns would be off the board, so it would be a theoretical draw. So I'm not sure in my when I put this endgame into an engine, it gives White a winning position. I'm not sure, you can really comment on that. I think Vishy should have gone here more actively. He could have even won the game against the world champion Magnus, but okay, still a great game, I think, by the Tiger Vishy Anand. He's playing again very good, and I wish him again all of the best in the continuation of the tournament. We'll see how Magnus will continue. I'm really sure that he's not satisfied with this outcome of these games that he's playing. He hasn't won a game for 7 games now. That it has never been happened to him, I think, in any of these tournaments, in these big tournaments, and Magnus has to improve if he wants to win this game. So okay, I hope you enjoyed this game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from the series, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.